A cold winter night, snow falling. A long black car pulls up outside a boarded-up old movie theater on a forgotten street. The door opens, and out steps one of the most famous men alive, completely alone. Robin Williams. He had told no one where he was going, and now here he stood, a beloved movie star, shivering on an empty sidewalk, staring up at a broken marquee that had not lit up in 30 years, with tears in his eyes. Because 60 years before, on the coldest and loneliest night of his young life, a freezing, forgotten boy with nowhere in the world to go had walked through that very door. And what happened inside changed everything. To understand why a grown man would stand and weep on an empty street, you have to go all the way back to when Robin was not a star, not a legend, not anybody at all. He was 19 years old, brand new to a big and freezing city, and everything had gone wrong. The little money he had brought was gone. The room he had been promised had fallen through. He had already spent 2 nights sleeping sitting up in a cold bus station, and on this 3rd night, they had turned him out into the street. He walked the icy sidewalks with his collar turned up and his hands jammed in his pockets. And for the first time in his young life, he truly did not know what was going to become of him. And then, ahead of him through the falling snow, he saw a warm and golden light. It was the glow of an old movie palace, one of those grand old theaters they used to build, with a marquee full of bright bulbs and a lobby of red carpet and gold trim. With the very last few coins he had in the world, he bought a single ticket to the late show. Not because he cared what was playing, but because inside it would be warm. He found a seat far in the back in an empty row, and he let the darkness and the soft flickering light wash over him. And for the first time in days, he stopped shivering, and he let out a long, tired breath. Now, working the aisle that night was the old Usher. He was well along in his years even then, a man with a kind and weathered face who had worked that same theater for more years than most people in that city had been alive. He had seen every kind of person come and go through those doors, and he knew the very moment he laid eyes on the boy in the thin coat asleep in the back row exactly what he was looking at. He had seen it many, many times before. So he did not say a word. He did not wake the boy, and he did not ask him to leave when the picture ended. He simply let him stay quietly through the next showing, and then the one after that. And at some point in the small, dark hours of the morning, the old man came and eased himself into a seat a little way down from the boy. He set a paper cup of hot coffee and half of his own wrapped sandwich on the armrest between them. "Cold one out there tonight," was all he said. They talked a little in the flickering dark, the old man and the boy. Robin did not say very much, and the old Usher did not press him for a thing. He just let him sit and be warm and be a person again for a little while. Sometimes that is the whole of what kindness is. Not fixing anything, just sitting beside someone in the dark so they do not have to be alone in it. When the gray morning light at last came creeping in under the lobby doors, and it was finally time for the boy to go back out into the world, the old Usher walked him to the front. And there, without any ceremony at all, he pressed a small fold of dollar bills into the boy's hand, more than he could truly spare, and closed the boy's cold fingers around it. And when Robin tried to protest, the old man only shook his head and looked him square in the eye and said the words that would follow Robin Williams for the rest of his days. He said, Everybody deserves a warm place and a good story. That's all. You go on now, and someday, when you've made it, and you will, you find somebody else out in the cold. And you do the same." The boy stepped out into the pale, snowy morning, and the heavy door swung shut behind him, and he never once saw the old Usher again. But he never, ever forgot him. In all the hard years that followed, the lean years, the hungry years, the years when the whole world still had no earthly idea who Robin Williams was, he held on to those simple words like a small, warm coal cupped in his hands. A warm place and a good story. On the nights when he wanted to give the whole thing up, when he lay awake wondering if any of it was ever going to be worth it, he would remember a kind old man in an empty theater who had looked at a nobody sleeping in the back row and had somehow seen somebody worth saving. And Robin would get back up, and he would go on. And then, as you well know, the world did find out exactly who he was. The fame came, and it came like a great flood. And Robin Williams became one of the most beloved men on the face of the earth. But here is the thing that so very few people ever knew. Through all of it, quietly, far away from every camera and every headline, Robin never once stopped keeping that old man's promise. All his life, he was the one who paid the stranger's bill and slipped out before anyone could thank him, who quietly took care of people down on their luck, who sat with the sick, who gave and asked that no one ever find out. In the truest sense of it, he had found people out in the cold again and again, and had spent his whole life paying back a debt from one snowy night. But there was one part of that promise Robin had never been able to keep, and it weighed on him more heavily with every passing year. He had never gone back to thank the old man himself. He had never told him what that night had meant, or that the boy from the back row had made it after all. And so, quietly, in the way he did nearly everything, Robin began to search. He simply wanted to find that old Usher, look him in the eye, and say thank you, before it was too late for either of them. But it was not easy at all. 60 years is a very long time. The boy had never even thought to learn the old man's name. The grand movie palace had closed its doors decades earlier and stood dark and boarded up. The company that once owned it was long gone, its records scattered to the wind. Robin brought in people to help him look. They chased down old ledgers, faded photographs, and the dim memories of anyone still living. Again and again the trail went cold. The years slipped past, and more than once Robin very nearly gave up and made his quiet peace with the aching thought that the kindest man he had ever met would go to his grave never knowing how the story turned out. And then, at long last, when he had almost stopped hoping, there came a lead. A single, very old photograph, and a name at last to go with the kind and weathered face in it. The old Usher was still alive. He was well into his 90s now, and he was living all alone in a small and shabby room in a run-down boarding house on the far side of the city. He had no family left, and the few friends who had known him were long gone. He spent his long days sitting by a small window, watching a world that had almost entirely forgotten he was there. And worst of all, Robin learned, the old man was about to lose even that. He could no longer afford the rent, and at the end of the month, he would have nowhere at all to go. 60 years on, the man who had once taken in a boy with nowhere to go was himself about to be put out into the cold. When Robin Williams heard that, he did not hesitate for a single moment. He canceled everything. He got straight on a plane, and a short while later, he was standing in a dim and peeling hallway outside a battered wooden door, his heart hammering in his chest like a nervous boy's. He raised his hand, and he knocked. And after a long, long moment, the door creaked slowly open. And there he was, smaller now and terribly frail, and bent low with age, leaning heavily on a wooden cane. But it was the very same kind and weathered face. The old usher peered up at the famous man filling his doorway, this man whose face he had seen 100 times on screens over the years. And he had no idea in the world why on earth Robin Williams would be standing outside his door. Robin, hardly able to get the words out, began to tell him. He told him about the snowy night 60 years before, about the thin coat and the back row, and the hot coffee, and the half a sandwich, and the little fold of dollar bills, and the words. And then, his voice breaking clean in half, he said, "You saved my life that night. I have thought about you every single day for 60 years. The old man listened, and his kind eyes slowly filled with tears. But then, very gently, almost apologetically, he shook his head. Because the truth was, he did not remember that particular boy. He could not. There had simply been too many. Over all those long years working that theater, he had quietly done the very same thing for hundreds of cold and frightened young people who had nowhere else on earth to go. He had never once counted them. He had never thought of it as anything special at all. It was, to him, simply what a decent person did, and somehow that made it the single most beautiful thing Robin Williams had ever heard in his life. Most people, hearing all of that, might have quietly written the old man a check and gone on their way with a warm feeling in their chest. But Robin Williams was not most people, and a check could never come close to settling a debt like this one. So instead, he did something extraordinary. Quietly, at his own very great expense, and telling almost no one at all, Robin Williams bought the old movie palace. The dark, dead, boarded-up theater where the whole thing had begun. And he brought in an army of craftsmen and workers, and he set them to restoring it lovingly, board by board and bulb by bulb, back to every last ounce of the grand and golden glory it had shone with on that snowy night 60 long years before. And then, on one perfect and bitterly cold winter evening, the great marquee of that old theater blazed back to life for the first time in 30 years. Every single bulb burned bright and warm against the falling snow, and the whole dark street glowed golden with it. The entire town had been invited, and the entire town came, filling those deep red velvet seats until there was not an empty one to be found. And in the very best seat in the whole house, right in the center of the front row, sat one small, bewildered old man in a borrowed suit, leaning on his cane, gazing up at all of it, wondering what on earth all of this fuss could possibly be about, and why a kind stranger had gone to such enormous trouble just to bring him here tonight. Then the great chandeliers dimmed, and a hush fell over the crowd, and Robin Williams walked out onto that stage, all alone, into a single warm circle of spotlight. And he did not tell a single joke. He told a story. He told that packed and silent theater about a night 60 years gone, about a freezing, frightened, forgotten boy who had once wandered in off the street with nowhere in the world to go, and about the quiet old usher who had given that boy warmth and food and a few precious dollars and a handful of words that had lit the path for an entire life. And then, with the tears streaming freely down his face, Robin slowly turned, and he pointed to the small, bewildered old man in the front row, and he said to them all, "That boy was me. And that man right there, is the reason I am standing on this stage tonight." And as one, the whole theater rose to its feet. The old man sat there, utterly overwhelmed, as an entire town stood and thundered its applause down upon him, wave after wave of it. And he wept the way a person weeps when they have spent a whole long lifetime feeling invisible, and are at the very last truly and fully seen. Later, when the crowds had gone home and the two of them sat quietly together in that beautiful empty theater, the old man admitted something in a soft and trembling voice. He said that over all the years he had watched every single film that Robin Williams ever made. He had sat alone in the dark and laughed and cried and felt a strange, quiet pride he could never quite explain, never once dreaming that the boy from the back row and the man up on the screen were one and the same. He had been quietly rooting for Robin all along, without ever knowing it. The old usher lived out the rest of his days in comfort and in warmth and in dignity, in a good home that a grateful movie star quietly saw to, surrounded for the first time in many long years by people who knew his name and were glad to say it. He passed away peacefully some time later, no longer alone and no longer forgotten by the world. And that old theater still stands today, and it still glows, its marquee kept lit to this very day. There is a small brass plaque in the lobby now. It does not give the old man's full name, because he never once wanted any fuss made over him. It reads simply, "A warm place and a good story for everyone who comes in from the cold." And when the world lost Robin Williams himself in that heavy summer of 2014, more than one person who knew this story walked quietly into that lobby and stood a long while before that little plaque, and understood at last exactly what kind of a man we had all just lost. Because that, in the end, was who he really was. Not the fireworks, and not the 1,000 voices, and not the famous, beloved face up on the screen. Underneath all of it, all the way down, there was a boy who had once been cold and lost and forgotten, and who had been saved by one stranger's quiet kindness, and who then spent the entire rest of his life trying to pass that same kindness quietly on to everyone he could. So tonight, in his memory, perhaps we can do the very same. Look around you. Somewhere close by, closer than you think, there is someone out in the cold, someone lonely, someone forgotten, someone who only needs a little warmth and to be reminded that they still matter. Find that person and give them a warm place and a good story. That is all he ever asked of any of us. And there is no finer way in all this world to remember Robin Williams.